Hello and welcome to today's episode, where we are going to talk about the canons of the verbal plane as expounded by Dr. Ranganathan. I am Mustafa Zaidi. I have over 3 decades of experience of teaching in the Aligarh Muslim University, and before that I have also worked in certain libraries. Now, we have already discussed in earlier programs and in earlier episodes that Dr. Ranganathan had divided the work of designing a scheme of classification into 3 planes of work, and these 3 planes of work he had named as idea plane, the verbal plane and the notational plane. At the time that these ideas were propounded, Ranganathan was a pioneer, because before him designers of classification schemes were more concerned with what is the notation or what were the symbols that they are going to use for denoting different terms. They were less concerned with the organization of knowledge, and they were more concerned with the kind of numbers that they were using. Dr. Ranganathan said that the emphasis of in classification work has to provide the right sequence and the right document to the user at the correct time with the minimum possible wastage of time. So, therefore, he decided that, in fact, he proposed that we should first try to design a scheme of classification, look at all the ways in which subjects are related to one another, then assign terms to the groups of concepts that we have assigned, we have organized, and then finally mechanize the arrangement with the help of what we call the notational plane. In an earlier episode, we have discussed about why it is necessary for us to have what we call the verbal plane. This plane comes after the idea plane. So, we have the idea plane, the verbal plane, and the third plane, that is the notational plane, that we will take up later. Now, before we come to the verbal plane, we have to understand why the verbal plane is important and why we require rules to formulate whatever we want to do in the verbal plane. And I told you in a previous discussion that there is a need for terminology standardization. This is necessary because the term that I use when I am working in a library, or the terms that I use when I am inputting some information into a computerized information system, then when you come and work at the same desk, or when someone else comes looking for what I have stored, then we should understand that the terms that I used are the terms that the client is also going to use, and the term that my successor is also going to use. So, that is why it is important that we should have a standardization of the terminology that we are using. We have also discussed the problems of homonyms and synonyms in terminology. We have also discussed the fact that meanings of words are not precise, and that meanings of words change over time and over distances. Ranganathan looked at all of them, and he proposed 4 solutions, and these 4 solutions he called the canons. The canons of the verbal plane. We have already discussed the meaning of the term canons. Canons mean laws or rules, and canons have a religious connotation in the English language, meaning religious laws are known as canons, and religious laws are sacred laws, meaning you normally do not question them. Ranganathan used the term canons because he said that these are basic rules which have to be followed if you are using them in the verbal plane. So, he said that he propounded 4 canons, and the names of these 4 canons are the Canon of Context, the Canon of Enumeration, the Canon of Reticence, and the canon of currency. So, to overcome the problems of the verbal plane or overcome the problems of terminology that we have discussed earlier, Ranganathan gave 4 solutions. He said that I am giving you 4 rules, and if these 4 rules are followed, then there will be no problem as far as interpretation of concepts in a classification scheme or in the catalog of a library are concerned, because if these are used, then we will see that no confusion would arise. Canon of context. Now, context means the background. Where is it being used? So, Ranganathan said that the meaning of a term in a scheme of classification or in a scheme of ideas and subjects in the light of the upper links. As the meaning of a term in a scheme of classification or in a scheme of ideas or in a scheme of subjects should be understood in the light of the upper links in the same chain. Now, what does this mean? Now, if you would all recall the diagrammatic representation that we make of a scheme of classification. For example, in the field of zoology, we have the protozoa at one end and the mammals at the other end. And there are different varieties of protozoa, there are different varieties of mammals. So, we have the term classification. Here also we have the term classification. When the term classification occurs here, it is not to be taken in isolation. It is to be understood in the light of what is coming before this. What is coming before this are unicellular animals or protozoans. So, classification here means classification of protozoans. Classification here means classification of mammals. Similarly, if the same term classification is used, let us say in botany, this term is used beneath botany, then what will it mean? It will mean a classification of plants in botany. So, the term is the same, but the meaning would change depending upon the context in which that particular thing is being used. Similarly, for example, we have I am using the same term classification. Classification is used in library science. The term classification in library science will mean what? It will mean classification of books. The same term in chemistry will mean the classification of chemistry. So, this as you know would go in an entirely different area, this would go in an entirely different area. In zoology, the classification will go in a different area, classification of protozoans will go in a different area within zoology. Within zoology, classification of mammals will go in a different area, but it will be kept separate from classification of plants which is studied in botany. So, the term is the same, but the meaning of this term is being understood in the light of its upper links. That means, from where it has been derived or from where it has come down. Similarly, we have, let us say, wheat, we have rice, we have barley, we have apples, we have let us say oranges. If the term harvesting is used, wheat harvesting, here harvesting is concerned with wheat. Here the same term is being used, but here it will mean rice harvesting. The same term can be used here also. Here it will mean harvesting of barley, and the same term can be used with apples as the upper link and with oranges as the upper link. In all of them, the context decide where this harvesting is to go or what is understood by this harvesting. So, just the general term harvesting may mean 100 different things, but the meaning of harvesting in a particular collection has to be understood in the light of the upper links beneath which the term harvesting has been used. So, that way the meaning of any term or the fact that we have what we call the problem of homonym. The problem of homonym is what? We have one word which means many different things. So, the term harvesting, for example, can be considered to be a homonym, but the problem of homonym is reduced or has been solved by using the canon of context. The meaning of harvesting will be understood in the light of what has come before that. Wheat has come before that, so it is different. This harvesting 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 is different. Similarly, the term classification used in zoology, it means different. It is something different. Used in botany, it is something different. In library science, it is something different. In building construction or in architecture, when you have classification of buildings, different types of buildings, that will mean something else. So, the term is the same, but the meaning of the term changes upon the context where it is being used. So, that is why this canon that Ranganathan gave is very important, and this has to be kept in mind. This helps us in standardization. The second canon that he gave us in this area was the canon of enumeration. Here again the language is nearly the same, that the meaning of a term should be the meaning of a term should be, I have been trying to paraphrase the definition that he had given, so that it becomes shorter. Meaning of a term should be understood in the light of its subdivisions or lower links. What does it mean? The canon of context talked of what came above. The canon of enumeration is talking about what comes beneath, what comes below. So, canon of context was that the term should be understood in the light of what has come in the background. Canon of enumeration says that what you should understand the meaning of a term by what comes as its subdivisions. Now, let us take a few examples which will tell us how this works. India. Geography of India, right. Now, India is being used here The meaning of India is to be understood in the light of what has come above it according to the canon of context, because geography is there. So, this means geography of India. If we had used the term history here, then India would have meant history of India. If we had used the term education there, then it would have meant education in India. So, that is the purpose of the canon of context. The purpose of canon of enumeration is what are given as its subdivisions. So, what are the subdivisions here? The subdivisions here are, for example, the different states that we have. We have J and K, we have Himachal Pradesh, we have Uttar Pradesh, we have Punjab, and so on. But if you think of India before 1947 and schemes of classification have existed before that time, then India also meant Sindh. India also meant Balochistan. India also meant what we today call Bangladesh. So, all of this was India, but in today's scheme this and this and this would not be part of India. So, the meaning of India after 1947 would exclude these, and once it is excluded, what it means is that the meaning of India, what India means, is different from what it meant up till 1947. If you would bear with me, I will give you another example. In the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is an adjacent state to Delhi, we had UP. It was divided into Ghaziabad and Meerut, and let us say Muzaffarnagar. Till about 40 years back, during the 1960s, Ghaziabad had a number of tehsils. Today, Ghaziabad does not include those tehsils. What are those tehsils which have come out of Ghaziabad? Noida and Greater Noida, or Gautam Budh Nagar as we call it today. Muzaffarnagar has also been divided, and we now have Shamli as a separate district. So, what it means is that if you have a book which deals with Muzaffarnagar, let us say agriculture of wheat in Muzaffarnagar, then if the book was published in 1960, it will include areas that are today a separate district with Shamli. But if you have the book today which talks of Muzaffarnagar in today's times, then Muzaffarnagar will not mean Shamli. Similarly, Ghaziabad today does not mean Noida, does not mean Greater Noida. I hope you understand what I am trying to say, that the meaning of a term in a scheme of classification is to be understood in the light of what are given as its subdivisions or what are enumerated below it. That is why it is known as the canon of enumeration. Whatever is listed below a concept, that would define its meaning. The context would define its meaning in another sense, the enumeration will define its meaning in another sense. So, depending upon this, there will be no confusion as far as this will also remove what we call synonyms. So, the canon of context tried to remove what we call homonyms, the canon of enumeration tried to remove what we call synonyms, and both of them together work in both of these contexts, that the meaning of a term Meaning of a term is to be understood by looking at two things: context and enumeration. Context means the background, enumeration means the subdivisions. In colon classification, if for those of you who have used colon classification, you would have noticed that in colon classification we have two main classes. Ranganathan calls them history and political science. Normally, as a lay person, when we talk of history, we are normally concerned with history of a particular area or history of people living in a particular area, whereas political science is more theoretical and is concerned with the manner in which politics plays itself out and the manner in which many different things are made. But if you look at the schedule of history in colon classification, it has constitution beneath history and it does not have constitution here. Normally, to a lay person, constitution should be part of political science. In Ranganathan's scheme, history includes constitution. It is not part of political science. So, we may criticize Ranganathan for putting constitution beneath history and not using it in political science. But the fact of the matter is that all books on constitution and its history are kept in colon classification under history, including those books which deal with the theoretical concepts of constitution. Those books are also brought in here under constitution. Why? Because Ranganathan enumerated it beneath history. We may argue over the correctness of placing the term constitution or books on constitution under history. Ranganathan had his own logic. He said that a constitution is not static. Constitution develops over time. There are times when constitutions change and you cannot separate the development of a constitution and the work of a constitution from the historical context in which that constitution has been made. So, he had his own logic, but if you look at these two rules that he gave us, the canon of context and the canon of enumeration, then there will be no confusion if you are using colon classification, where books on Constitution of India, for example, should be placed. Books on Constitution of India will be placed with books on history of India. There will be no book will go there, because if you put some books of constitution under history and some other books of constitution under political science, then what are we having? We have a problem of synonyms. What are synonyms? Two words or more than one word which mean the same thing. That means, we will have some books kept here and some books kept in another heading. To overcome that, Ranganathan gave us this, and he said that once you enumerate a particular concept as belonging to a particular area, then you stick to that. Now, after this, we have two more canons. They may not require that many examples. The third canon is the canon of reticence. What does reticence mean? Meaning, reticence means that do not be critical, do not express your opinion. When we are dealing with subjects, we are dealing with subjects as people who are classifying them or making them available to other people. So, we should not use terms which give our own opinion. For example, earlier in certain classification schemes, we used to have, in fact, we still have, we have authors, or let us say writers. Creative writers or creative authors, which are part of what we call in the literature, in the class of literature, we have a number of authors and writers. Some classification schemes had divided them as major authors and minor authors. Now, a major author of yesterday, a minor author of yesterday may become a major author today, because suddenly people may start looking at his particular books, poems, dramas, etc., and say that this person was also a great author. So, these are judgmental terms. What the canon is telling us is, do not use judgmental terms. For example, many classification schemes for magic say use the term humbug or fraud. Magic is a profession. Earlier classification schemes used to use the term humbug and fraud, and used to say that this is the place where books on magic should be kept. But this is a judgment. Fraud is a judgment, humbug is a judgment. So, this should not be done. Similarly, you may use the term dictator for certain states. You may say that there you have a dictatorial system. Now, dictator is again something which is judgmental. So, the canon of reticence says that we should not use terms which express our opinion, we should be value neutral. And the last canon that we have is the canon of currency. If you recall, we had in an earlier discussion we had talked about the fact that meanings of words change over time. Meanings of words change when more literature is produced on them. There are many more branches which occur there. This problem is sought to be solved by Ranganathan by propounding the canon of currency. He says the terms that you use should be current. That means, they should be used by people who are working in that subject field at that particular point of time. If you are using natural philosophy for physics, and today people are using the term physics, then you should use the term physics rather than natural philosophy. Although many of your books printed in earlier times would still be kept under natural philosophy, in today's books should be kept under currency. So, that is why he said that we should use terms which are current, which are modern, so that our scheme remains up to date and relevant to the people for whom it is intended. So, I hope I have been able to convey the 4 principles of Dr. Ranganathan as far as the verbal plane is concerned, and if in case there are any problems, we will get to them in the next lecture. Thank you very much.